I didn't find this ship. I bought it, and that was my first mistake. What you're looking at right now was listed as non-functional alien debris, recovery value near zero. No bidders, no interest. Salvage guilds ignored it. Restorers laughed at it. Even black market dealers wouldn't touch it, which should have told me everything I needed to know. But I bought it anyway. Because buried under 6 meters of rock and dust was a matte black alien cruiser, older than any recorded human expedition, completely intact, and according to every scan dead. No power, no emissions, no residual fields. A perfect restoration candidate. Or so I thought. Here's the part one need you to understand in the first 30 seconds. Nothing happens by accident in alien salvage. If nobody wants a ship, it's not because it's worthless. It's because it's dangerous. The moment excavation finished, my instruments started glitching. Not alarms, not warnings. Subtle things. Time desync on the scanners. Power readings that appeared for half a second, then vanished. The kind of anomalies restorers learn to ignore until they don't. I approached the hull expecting decay. Instead, the surface reacted. Not violently, not dramatically, just a faint ripple under the metal like something beneath it had shifted, noticed me. That's when I realized this cruiser hadn't been abandoned. It had been left, and the system I was about to touch wasn't broken. It was waiting. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what happened when I tried to restore the ship nobody wanted, and why waking it up may have been the biggest mistake of my career. If you want more deep space salvage stories, forbidden restorations, and alien tech that absolutely should not be touched, consider subscribing, liking the video, and dropping a comment. It helps the channel more than you think. The first subsystem I powered wasn't critical. That's important. In Salvage, you never start with engines, cores, or control matrices. You probe something insignificant: surface diagnostics, passive memory buffers, corrosion mapping. If the ship reacts badly, you walk away with your spine intact. So I connected to a maintenance node near the hull breach. No direct power injection, just a low-voltage handshake, barely enough to wake dormant circuits, if any still existed. The cruiser shouldn't have noticed, but it did. The moment the link established, the hull temperature changed, uniformly across the entire exposed surface. Not a spike, a correction. Like the ship was compensating for something that had just re-entered its awareness. Then my scanner returned a reading that made no sense. Power draw, external. The ship wasn't pulling energy from my equipment. It was drawing it from the ground. I cut the connection immediately, heart pounding, waiting for the systems to settle. They didn't. Instead, faint lines appeared across the hull. Alien glyphs surfacing through the black, plating like veins under skin. They weren't glowing aggressively. They were stabilizing, locking into place. This wasn't activation. It was initialization. I ran a deeper scan and finally saw what the early diagnostics had missed. Beneath the cruiser wasn't just rock. There was a structure, vast, geometric, extending far beyond the ship's footprint. The cruiser wasn't crashed. It was anchored, and suddenly, the phrase non-functional debris felt like a deliberate lie. The glyphs shifted again, rearranging themselves into a new pattern. My interface attempted translation and failed, but something else happened instead. The ship emitted a pulse, subtle but measurable, that traveled downward through the structure beneath it. A signal, sent deliberately. Whatever this cruiser was connected to, I had just told it the system was no longer alone. I stood there, staring at a ship that should have been inert, realizing that I hadn't bought scrap. I bought a node, and somewhere far below, something had just received my call. The salvage records finally made sense once I knew what to look for. I pulled archived claims, abandoned contracts, half-finished surveys, everything connected to this cruiser. There were at least 7 previous attempts to evaluate it. All of them ended the same way. The crews left without filing reports. No damage logs, no distress calls, just quiet withdrawals and sealed files. At first, I thought that meant casualties. It didn't. It meant agreement. Every team that got close enough to run deep scans had discovered the same thing I was now seeing. The ship wasn't designed to travel through space. It was designed to interface with planets. The cruiser was a control unit, not a vehicle. A planetary-scale regulator buried just beneath the surface. And that changes everything. You don't salvage infrastructure. You don't restore systems that are still doing their job. Especially not when you don't understand what that job is. The structure beneath the ship wasn't passive support. It was active machinery. Energy channels woven through the bedrock. Gravitational anchors stabilizing the crust. Fields that dampened tectonic stress before it could escalate into catastrophe. This ship had been keeping the planet stable. Quietly. For a very long time. I realized then why the cruiser was listed as unwanted. Restoring it would mean assuming responsibility for a system that affected an entire world. Any mistake wouldn't just fry circuits. It could trigger quakes, atmospheric shifts, maybe even orbital instability. And yet, the glyphs on the hull were still changing. Not reacting to my scans anymore. They were updating on their own, cycling through configurations that suggested decision trees, fallback protocols, escalation thresholds. The system had moved past detection. It was assessing me. That's when the access seam appeared along the ship's flank. A perfectly straight line, glowing faintly, opening without tools, without prompts. An invitation or a trap, depending on how optimistic you are. No alarms, no warnings, just an open path into the heart of something no one else had been willing to touch. I knew if I stepped inside, this would stop being a salvage operation. It would become a negotiation. Crossing the threshold felt wrong in a way I can't fully explain. Not dangerous, not hostile, just intentional. Like the ship had waited long enough and finally decided now was acceptable. The interior wasn't dark. It was lit by a soft, ambient glow that didn't come from fixtures or panels. The light seemed to exist in the air itself, diffused evenly, revealing corridors that curved with organic precision. No sarpangles, no exposed waiting. Everything flowed, as if the ship had been grown rather than built. My boots echoed once, then the floor adapted. The surface firm beneath my steps, subtly reshaping to distribute weight, dampen vibration, reduce stress. This wasn't a wreck. This was a system operating at reduced capacity, but still operating. I followed the corridor toward what my scanner insisted was the central node. As I walked, the walls began to display faint projections, star maps, planetary cross-sections, orbital paths slowly rotating in 3 dimensions. None of them matched current records. These were old, very old. The ship wasn't just tied to this planet. It had been assigned to it. Long-term oversight, continuous correction, the kind of role you give to something you never expect to leave its post. Then I reached the core chamber. At the center floated a structure unlike anything I'd seen before. Not a reactor, not a computer. A lattice of interlocking rings, rotating at different speeds, emitting pulses that resonated through the chamber and, according to my readings, straight into the planet's mantle. This was the regulator, and it was failing. Microfractures rippled across the holographic planet projection above it. Stress lines branching outward, blinking warnings that no human interface was meant to read. The ship had been compensating for centuries, maybe longer, slowly losing the ability to keep up. That's when the voice spoke. Not aloud, not in my ears, directly in my thoughts. Designation mismatch, it said. Primary custodian absent. Secondary agent detected. I froze. The rings slowed. The projections reoriented, centered on me. Confirm intent, the system continued. Restoration or extraction? That was the moment I understood the real risk. If I answer wrong, this ship wouldn't just shut down. It would let the planet tear itself apart. Before we go any further, if you're enjoying this story so far and want to see how deep this restoration goes, consider subscribing, liking the video, and dropping a comment. It genuinely helps Galactic Restorer reach more people who love this kind of sci-fi salvage. Now, back to the moment everything changed. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't understand the question, but because I understood it too well. Restoration meant committing to the ship's original function. Becoming part of a system designed to stabilize a planet I knew nothing about, using technology one could barely comprehend. It wasn't a repair job. It was a lifelong assignment. Maybe longer. Extraction was the selfish choice. Strip the ship, sell what I could, walk away rich while the regulator failed slowly, quietly, inevitably. No alarms, no explosions. Just a world destabilizing over decades until it finally broke. The core waited. I could feel it measuring micro changes in my breathing, heart rate, neural activity. This thing didn't need my words. It needed my intent. I'm not your custodian, I finally said aloud, my voice small in the chamber. I'm just a restorer. The rings paused. Custodians are assigned, the voice replied. Restorers are chosen. The projections shifted again. This time they weren't planetary charts. They were schematics, overlays of the ship's systems, damaged pathways, dormant modules, power reserves I hadn't even detected. And threaded through all of it was a single directive. Adaptive partnership required. It wanted help, not ownership, not obedience, a hybrid solution. The ship would remain bound to the planet, but its operational autonomy could be restructured. Limited external access, modular restoration, human oversight without full integration. In simple terms, I wouldn't be trapped here forever, but the work wouldn't be easy. The regulator's outer rings had to be dismantled, reforged with materials no longer native to this world. The ship knew where they were. Scattered across the surface, buried in the wreckage of smaller constructs that had failed centuries ago. This wasn't a single restoration. It was a campaign, and if I walked away now, the ship would revert to emergency containment mode, buying the planet maybe another 50 years. I looked up at the glowing lattice, at a machine that had held a world together longer than humanity had known spaceflight. All right, I said quietly. Restoration it is, but we do this my way. The rings resumed their rotation, and somewhere deep beneath the planet's crust, something ancient adjusted its calculations, because for the first time in centuries, it wasn't alone. The ship didn't ease me into the work. It threw me straight into it. At dawn, if you can call the slow brightening of this planet's sky dawn, the cruiser activated a surface marker 30 kilometers east of the crash site. No map, no explanation, just a pulsing beacon and a single line of text burned into my visor. Primary stabilizer, offline. I packed light. Too light in hindsight. The stabilizer turned out to be a half-buried structure the size of a tower block, fused into the rock like it had grown there. Its surface wasn't metal or stone, but something in between, layered, adaptive, still faintly warm after centuries of inactivity. The moment I touched it, my suit screamed warnings. Radiation spikes, gravity shear, localized time distortion, so mild it barely registered. And that scared me more than a full anomaly. This wasn't dead tech. It was injured. The ship fed instructions directly into my visor, but they weren't step-by-step repairs. They were outcomes, desired states, balance thresholds, as if it expected me to improvise. So I did. I cut into the outer shell, rerouted fractured conduits, and bridged gaps with human alloy the ship clearly considered primitive. Every time I made a change, the stabilizer reacted, sometimes correcting me, sometimes resisting, sometimes doing nothing at all. Then I made a mistake. I bypassed a feedback loop I didn't fully understand, assuming it was a redundant failsafe. The moment the circuit closed, the ground dropped out from under me. Gravity inverted for half a second. My vision smeared. My suit locked up as space folded inward. I hit the ground hard, lungs screaming, ears ringing, every instinct telling me I just triggered a planetary defense response. The stabilizer flared, not with light, with pressure. The air itself compressed, trying to crush me into the rock. My visor cracked. Systems failed one by one. And in that instant, I realized something critical. The ship wasn't testing my skills. It was testing my limits. I screamed for an abort. Not into the comms, into the interface itself. I slammed my glove against the stabilizer and shouted the only thing that felt true. I'm still here. I'm still fixing you. The pressure stopped. The The stabilizer powered down to a survivable state. My suit rebooted in emergency mode, and a new message appeared, quieter than all the others before it. Error acknowledged. Adaptation in progress. The ship had learned from me, and I understood then that every repair would be a negotiation between human instinct and alien logic. One wrong move away from death. I thought the danger was the tech. I was wrong. The real threat was the history baked into it. After the stabilizer incident, the ship unlocked archived memory fragments, partial, degraded, never meant for human interpretation. They weren't recordings in the way we understand them. They were contextual echoes, cause and effect, compressed into sensation. Every restorer before me had made the same assumption, that the cruiser had failed catastrophically, that it was a relic of a lost war or a collapsed empire. It wasn't. It was a containment system. The planet wasn't naturally stable. Its core output fluctuated wildly on a scale that should have torn the crust apart. The alien builders didn't colonize this world. They restrained it. The cruiser was one node in a planetary network designed to bleed off excess energy, regulate tectonic flow, and dampen reality distortions that would otherwise rupture space itself. And restorers? They never made it past the first layer. Because the moment you try to strip this ship for parts, the system reacts defensively. Not violently, but subtly. Power drains, navigation errors, psychological pressure, the kind of failures that convince professionals to walk away thinking they got lucky. I saw it all laid out in the data. Names, guilds, salvage crews who lasted hours, days, sometimes weeks before abandoning the site. All of them believing the ship was useless. All of them unknowingly passing the test by leaving it alone. I didn't. I stayed. And that's why the ship engaged with me differently. One archive fragment hit harder than the rest. It showed a previous restorer who almost succeeded, someone who figured out the stabilizers, who started repairs just like I did. He failed not because of lack of skill, but because he tried to override the system. He wanted control. The ship shut him out. His last recorded state wasn't death. It was exile. The cruiser deliberately erased his access and went dormant again, waiting for someone who didn't try to own it. That realization changed how I approached everything. I stopped forcing solutions, stopped assuming dominance. I started asking, testing ideas, watching reactions, letting the ship guide me without surrendering my autonomy. That's when progress accelerated. Subsystems began responding faster. Power routing stabilized. The ship even started compensating for my human inefficiencies instead of punishing them. But with every success came a growing awareness. I wasn't just restoring a ship. I was becoming part of a system older and more patient than any civilization I'd ever known. And systems like that don't reveal their deepest secrets until they're sure you won't misuse them. The projection activated without warning. No prompt, no request, just a sudden shift in the chamber as the air dimmed and the lattice around me rearranged itself into something disturbingly familiar. It showed the site without me. The crash zone was empty. My equipment gone. The scaffolds collapsed and buried by dust. The cruiser half exposed, silent once more. Time accelerated. Not smoothly, but in uneven surges, like the system itself struggled to simulate abandonment. At first, nothing happened. Decades passed. The planet looked fine, stable, calm. Then the failures began. Microfractures formed beneath the surface, invisible at first. Tectonic stresses built in places no human sensor would ever think to monitor. Oceans shifted, magnetic fields warped, subtle enough that no civilization would notice until it was far too late. The projection skipped ahead again. Cities, alien, then human, rose and fell in fast forward. Each one unknowingly built atop a ticking imbalance. Every time intelligent life appeared, the system tried to compensate with less and less power available. Eventually, the cruiser's remaining reserves were gone. That's when the planet broke. Not in an explosion, not in a cinematic apocalypse, just a slow unraveling. Gravity inconsistencies, spatial tears, regions where physics simply stopped agreeing with itself. The kind of disaster that doesn't kill everyone at once, but makes survival impossible. The final frame froze. A dead world. Then the chamber snapped back to reality. I was shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of being shown a future I never asked to see. The ship hadn't threatened me. It hadn't begged. It had informed me. Continued restoration reduces probability of system collapse to acceptable parameters. The interface stated calmly. Acceptable to who? That question lingered unspoken between us, because I understood something now that every restorer before me hadn't. Walking away wasn't a neutral choice. It was a decision with consequences measured in centuries. The ship wasn't trapping me here. It was trusting me with a burden. And the worst part? I couldn't unsee that future. Even if I wanted to leave, I knew exactly what would happen if I did. There's a moment in every restoration where you cross a line. Not the dramatic kind. No alarms. No countdown. Just a quiet realization that whatever you do next can't be undone. For me, it was the core splice. The ship identified a dormant conduit running straight through the heart of the cruiser. Sealed, isolated, untouched since the original shutdown. Reactivating it wouldn't just restore functionality. It would relink the ship to the planetary network permanently. No more partial engagement. No more reversible states. Once connected, the cruiser would stop being salvage. It would become infrastructure. I stood there for a long time, staring at the interface. My reflection warped across the matte black surface, broken up by faint purple pulses and moving beneath the hull like a slow heartbeat. The ship wasn't rushing me. It never did. That was part of what made it terrifying. It trusted me to decide. I ran every simulation I could. Every human model said the same thing. Best case scenario, restoration succeeds and the system stabilizes. Worst case, cascading failure on a planetary scale. No second chances. No shutdown switch. And yet, something bothered me. The ship's projections were too clean. Too honest. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a gamble for it. The risk was mine alone. If the splice failed, I'd be the one inside the blast radius. The one fused into the system as it collapsed. The ship would endure. It always had. That's when I understood the final test. Not skill. Not intelligence. Commitment. I placed my hand on the conduit interface and authorized the splice manually, cutting off remote aborts, disabling automated rollback. The system hesitated for the first time since I'd arrived. Confirm. Operator will be within failure zone, it warned. I know, I said. That's the point. The conduit opened. Energy surged, not violently, but deliberately. Systems long thought inert came online in sequence, each one syncing with the planet beneath us. I felt the gravity shift again, but this time it stabilized like the world itself exhaled. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the ship spoke, not through text or projection, but through resonance. A deep, harmonic vibration that rattled my bones. Link established. The moment the link stabilized, the ship changed. Not visually, not in any way a camera would catch, but the feel of the place shifted, like standing inside a machine that had finally remembered its job. New data streams opened, cleaner than anything I'd seen before. The ship wasn't just regulating the planet's core. That was a side effect, a necessary one, but not the reason it existed. This cruiser was a keystone, one of many. The aliens who built it didn't travel the galaxy to conquer or explore. They traveled to patch reality where it was weakest. This planet sat near a fault, not tectonic but dimensional, a thin place where space-time strained under its own rules. Left unchecked, the fault would widen. The ship wasn't preventing a planetary disaster. It was preventing something far worse. The projections expanded outward, showing neighboring systems, then entire sectors. Subtle distortions linked by invisible stress lines. This planet wasn't unique, it was early. A precursor. A warning sign of fractures that would one day tear through inhabited space. And this cruiser? It was designed to anchor reality itself. That's why it couldn't be allowed to fail. Why it tested restorers instead of accepting anyone willing to flip a switch. Why it demanded partnership instead of control. I laughed quietly, the sound hollow in the chamber. "So you're not broken," I said. "You're understaffed." The ship didn't deny it. "Network degraded," it replied. "Keystones non-responsive." Most of the others were gone. Destroyed. Abandoned. Or never restored. That's when the implication hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't the end of the job. It was the beginning. Restoring this ship meant making it visible again to a network that might still be out there or might already be failing. It meant drawing attention from forces, natural or otherwise, that had benefited from these fractures remaining unchecked. I had restored a safeguard older than human civilization, and safeguards attract attention. The first sign wasn't visual. It was silence. Background radiation dropped across every band. Stellar noise flattened. Even the planet's natural electromagnetic chatter faded, like the system was holding its breath. The ship flagged it instantly, not as a threat, but as an external acknowledgement. Something had detected the keystone reactivating. Long-range sensors, previously blind beyond the local system, flickered online. Not because the ship powered them, but because space itself briefly aligned. For a fraction of a second, I saw a corridor of clarity stretch across interstellar distance, like a tunnel punched through static. And at the far end of it, movement, not ships, not fleets, patterns. Massive, slow-changing structures that didn't travel through space so much as reshape it around themselves. The ship didn't label them enemies. It didn't label them allies either. Observer classes detected, it reported. I asked the obvious question. Have they always been there? A pause. Longer than usual. They emerge when anchors activate. So the fractures weren't accidents. They were opportunities. Something out there benefited from weakened reality. Entities that thrived in instability, that watched systems like this one decay and waited patiently for the moment containment failed. The aliens hadn't just been repairing the galaxy. They had been holding a line. And now, after centuries of silence, one of their anchors had come back online. With a human standing at its center, the ship began routing power into defensive configurations I hadn't authorized. Not weapons, countermeasures, reality dampeners, signal scramblers, things designed to make the system less interesting to whatever was watching. But it was too late for subtlety. The observers had already marked us. I felt it then, a pressure behind my thoughts, like something testing the edges of perception, curious but restrained. Not hostile, not yet, just aware. The ship spoke one last time before locking down the chamber. Restoration status, incomplete. Custodian required. I swallowed hard, because now I understood the final truth of this job. Restoring the ship didn't make me powerful. It made me visible. The lockdown lifted slowly. No alarms, no urgency, just the quiet hum of a system that had accepted a new reality and was waiting to see what I'd do with it. The ship didn't demand an answer. It never did. That was the difference between it and every machine humanity had ever built. It offered information, consequences, and choice, then stepped back. I walked outside as the sun climbed over the horizon, casting long shadows across the wreckage-strewn plain. The cruiser loomed behind me, no longer just a wreck, but no longer fully awakened either. Somewhere between artifact and guardian. I thought about leaving, about cashing out what I could still salvage, about reporting the site anonymously, about pretending I'd never seen the projections, never felt that pressure of being noticed. But visibility cuts both ways. If something out there was watching for fractures, then someone had to watch back. The ship had survived centuries alone, holding a line no one knew existed. It didn't need a hero. It needed a restorer willing to stay, learn, and adapt. Someone who understood that fixing things sometimes means becoming part of them. So I stayed. Not because I was brave. Not because I was chosen. Because walking away would have been easier, and I'd already seen where that path led. This cruiser still isn't fully restored. The network is still fragmented. The observers are still out there. And every day I work on this ship, I know I'm making the universe slightly more stable and myself slightly more exposed. If this restoration fails, there won't be a dramatic ending. Just a quiet unraveling no one will notice until it's too late. But if it succeeds, then maybe, just maybe, this won't be the last anchor to wake up. And that's why I'm still here.